Hello there, and welcome to Whispers to Sleep. My name is David, and I'm truly honored to be your guide tonight. Here we believe sleep is not just a routine. It's a gentle journey, a quiet return to peace every night. I craft stories with care, so your mind can rest and your body can soften all you need to do. Let go, take a slow deep breath in, and as you breathe out, allow the day to melt away. Close your eyes. Get cozy under the covers and let my voice lead you into calm, into comfort, into dreams. This is your time. Your memento. Truly relax. Let's begin. You open your eyes to the warm hush of desert air. The light here is different, not sharp, but golden, like honey poured from the sky. It coats everything it touches, the sand, the stones, your skin, and the ancient monuments that rise from. The earth, like dreams, made solid dot in the distance. You see it, a single obelisk standing tall, taller than it should be, taller than the sky can seem to hold. It glows faintly under the Egyptian sun, as if it remembers light in a way no other object does. It doesn't just reflect the sun, it recalls it. It is stone, yes, but also memory. You walk slowly toward it, your feet sinking gently into the powdery sand. The air is still, heavy with heat and age. Each step feels like a step back in time, back to a world where people shaped the very elements to whisper to the divine. Where stone was a canvas and time was a sculptor, the obelisk rises from a platform of polished granite, its sharp point aimed not just upward, but beyond. You run your hand over the surface. It's smooth, surprisingly so, warm from the sun, but also from something deeper. You feel its temperature not just on your skin, but in your bones. The granite is pinkish, speckled with flecks of quartz and mica that shimmer like stardust. Carved into its surface are rows upon rows of hieroglyphs. You can't read them, not with your eyes, but your mind understands something deeper. The language of awe, the language of those who looked at the sky and wanted to leave a message there. Not to be read, perhaps, but to be felt. The obelisk speaks in light, in angles, in silence. You sit in its shadow, which stretches long and thin across the sand like a sundial made for the gods. And as you sit, you begin to listen, not with ears, but with breath. You notice how still the world becomes near the obelisk. Not empty, just ... attentive. The ancient Egyptians believed that the obelisk was a petrified sunbeam. Not a sculpture, but a presence. A needle of fire turned to stone, connecting earth to sky. A bridge not between places, but between meanings. Its point, they said, was like Ra's first touch each morning, a kiss of creation. You look up slowly. The tip of the obelisk pierces nothing. There is no resistance, no protest from the air. It simply is. So certain, so calm. Its very shape resists chaos. Obelisks were carved from a single piece of stone, monolithic. The word itself means one stone, and yet it holds many truths. To carve such a thing, to move it, to raise it, all without machines, was not simply a matter of effort. It was precision. It was reverence turned into geometry dot, and they always pointed east, toward the sun, not because they worshipped the sun like an object, but because they understood that light gives shape to the invisible. You lean back on your elbows, the sand warm beneath you. Your eyes close, but your mind stays open. You imagine the quarry at Aswan, hundreds of miles away. The roars of workers, the pounding of dolerite hammers against granite, sparks of stone and sweat. You imagine the moment the obelisk broke free from the earth, like a child being born not from flesh, but from pressure and patience. And when it was carved, perfect, smooth, slender, heavy beyond imagination, they transported it across land and water, using boats that trusted physics more than hope. Ropes, pulleys, rolling logs, the logic of levers and labor. Science not written, but lived. Even now, millennia later, the obelisk still stands. It has survived floods, invasions, earthquakes, and time. Not because it fought back, but because it waited. Because its purpose was not urgency, but stillness. You realize this is not just a monument. It's a measure of ambition, of devotion, of what it means to try and leave something behind that cannot be erased. The wind picks up slightly, lifting a curl of sand into the air. It dances for a moment, then settles again. And for a second, you feel the weight of nothing, the delicate balance between permanence and disappearance. The sun lowers toward the horizon, and the obelisk glows deeper gold. You watch the light cling to its edges like a memory refusing to fade. And as the shadow grows longer, the obelisk seems taller, almost as if it's rising, just a little more. To catch one last whisper from the sky dot, it is in this moment you understand. Stone can speak, not in words, but in orientation, in intention, in the way it holds its silence like an offering. You feel small beside it, not in shame, but in comfort. Small like a single star in a sky full of them. Small like a drop in the Nile. Essential because of your stillness, not in spite of it. Night begins to fall. The heat softens. The stars arrive without announcement. And the obelisk, steady, unmoved, begins to change color in the dark. Not visibly, but in meaning that you lie down beside it, the cool sand cradling your back. The ancient granite towers above, but no longer imposes. It guards. It remembers. Not just the sun, but all who once stood in its shadow and asked, "What are we meant to hold on to?" You listen closely. There is no answer. Only the gentle hum of presence dot, and yet something inside you whispers. Before it rose, someone had to make it stand. Someone had to understand how. Not just spiritually, but physically. With balance, with thought, with the quiet confidence of science. And you wonder now, gently, almost sleepily, how does one raise a monument that weighs more than 100 tons? How does one lift the sky with stone? The answer begins not with gods, but with angles, with ropes, levers, and patience, carved into motion. You close your eyes, and the stone begins to tilt. You step softly into a place where minds met stone. The air is thick with dust and sunlight, drifting through columns and scaffolds built by hands that knew no rush. You walk among ancient engineers, not dreamers, but doers, men who studied. The heavens yet worked with sand and sweat. They do not wear robes of gold, nor hold staffs of magic. Instead, their tools are simple: wood, rope, stone. Their wisdom is not written in books, but in grooves carved into limestone, in the lines drawn by calloused fingers across warm earth. They do not chant. They measure dot in front of you lies. A sleeping giant, the obelisk, freshly carved, glinting pink in the morning light. It rests on its side, as if unsure whether it is truly ready to rise. It is perfect, monolithic, whole, but it is not yet alive, not until it stands. You hear the quiet conversations of geometry in motion, angles whispered between men who have watched the stars. They speak not of gods, but of center of mass, of fulcrums and load, of effort divided over distance. This is where physics becomes poetry. To raise a monument that weighs hundreds of tons is to dance with gravity. Not to fight it, never that, but to court it. To understand its rhythm and lean with it, not against. Like sailing a boat or climbing a dune, you must feel when to push and when to yield. They build a sandpit at the base, a cradle that will catch the obelisk when it tips. They raise massive earthen ramps, slope by slope, carved not in haste, but in harmony. Everything here is deliberate. Each stone laid, each beam positioned, each pause observed like a breath. Before lifting Dot, you walk among them as they prepare the ropes, woven thick from papyrus and palm. Coils of tension waiting to be tested. Each man takes his place. No shouting, no show of strength, only rhythm. Only trust in what has worked before and what will work again. A signal is given. You feel it more than hear it. The silence shifts and the pulling begins. Not all at once. That would be chaos. But gradually, like the tide easing in, gathering strength from many small waves. The obelisk stirs. Your heart beats with theirs. Not out of fear, but anticipation. The weight begins to move, slow and sure. A deliberate awakening. It tilts just slightly and stops. Wooden braces are slid into place beneath it, locking in this small victory. And again, pull, lift, pause. Inches claimed like mountain ledges. This process takes days. You return each morning to find the stone just a little higher, the ropes a little more worn, the sandpit a little smaller. But something else grows too, a quiet pride. The kind that comes not from conquering, but from understanding that one day you arrive, and the obelisk is nearly upright. Its base is cradled in the pit, its body leaning into the sky like a question nearly answered. It wavers, just for a moment, and then, with one last collective breath, it stands, and the desert hushes, not from awe, but from acknowledgement. The task is complete, not because men defied nature, but because they listened to her rules. The physics behind this feat is elegant in its simplicity. The obelisk's center of gravity had to stay within the base at all times. Each pole had to apply consistent force along the proper angle. The ramps had to support its weight without crumbling. The sandpit had to catch it gently, like hands catching a falling child. These are not spells. These are principles. And yet, what is more magical than something impossibly heavy, impossibly ancient, standing straight and tall, as if by will alone? You walk slowly around it, craning your neck. The hieroglyphs spiral upward like a language not meant to be read, but felt. They are not instructions. They are reminders that reverence is not separate from reason. As twilight falls, the obelisk casts its first full shadow, long and certain. It points away from the past, into the unknown, not as a monument to power, but to patience. You think of the countless hands that touched this stone, the cutters, the polishers, the engineers, the lifters, each one part of a collective motion that defied silence with structure. Their names are lost, but their work endures. This is how civilizations breathe, through monuments that rise not in defiance of the world, but in quiet alignment with it. Through a science that kneels beside mystery and builds upward, you reach out and touch the base again. It's different now, cooler, steadier, not just a stone, but a story fulfilled. And yet, as you stare up once more into its narrowing tip, you sense another journey waiting, not here, but far from this sand and sun. Because now that the obelisk stands, it must travel. But how do you move something taller than a house, heavier than memory, across land, across water, across time? The sky darkens above you, but the obelisk remains, quietly daring you to follow. To float beside it on the slow-moving heart of the Nile. You wake to the hush of water, not the roar of waves, but the tender sound of a river breathing. The Nile moves slowly beside you, its surface soft with morning light, its banks still wrapped in early mist. You are not rushing. You drift. Current is gentle, but sure. The river knows where it's going. And so, you let yourself be carried. Not just by water, but by memory. Here, in this place, the Nile is more than a river. It is a thread woven through the fabric of centuries. Glance to the shore. Date palms rise in lazy clusters. Beyond them, temples sleep, their stones worn smooth by sun and wind. Their columns lean slightly, like elders nodding off in afternoon warmth. And among them, tall, still, and precise, stand the obelisks. Watch as one glimmers in the haze. Its point reaches into the sky with quiet certainty. It is not shouting. It is listening. The ancient Egyptians believed the Nile was the mirror of the Milky Way. As above, so below. They saw in its curves the same arcs that traced the heavens, and in its floods, the pulse of creation itself. The obelisks, born of stone but shaped by spirit, were offerings, not to dominate, but to honor. Frozen sunbeams, placed carefully, near temples and tombs, each one aligned with intention. You could almost hear it, the ancient chant, the ceremonial placing, the hope carved into each line of hieroglyph. These weren't decorations. They were messengers. Their vertical reach spoke of aspiration. Their permanence, of memory. You lie back in the boat and let the Nile cradle you. The water below is dark, deep with silt and story. Fish flicker beneath, reeds sway above. And somewhere, beneath the surface are the whispers of workers, traders, priests, all once carried on this same path. The river was Egypt's spine. It carried goods, grain, gold, and granite. Especially granite. You picture it now, a massive obelisk, just like the one you saw raised, floating sideways on a barge. Wooden, flat, wide, designed not for speed, but stability. Men pull the vessel gently forward, steering not just stone, but significant stock. Transporting a monument down the Nile wasn't guesswork. It was science. They waited for the right season. The flood, when the water ran high and smooth. They aligned weight with current, calculated drift, reinforced the hulls with palm fibers and prayer. Imagine the sound, creaking ropes, flapping linen sails, quiet orders passed from boatman to boatman. And all the while, the obelisk rests. It doesn't fight the journey. It allows itself to be carried, like you. You trail your fingers in the water. It is neither cold nor warm, just alive. Its surface breaks around your hand, reshapes, resumes. You wonder how many others have done this, centuries ago. Felt the same pulse. Heard the same silence. On the western bank, a heron takes flight. Its wings flap in slow rhythm, echoing the boat's steady progress. In the distance, you see a dock, a place where stone met ceremony. That's where the obelisk would land. Unloaded by teams of men, guided by ramps, received with reverence. Placed not randomly, but deliberately. Each temple had its axis, its sacred alignment. Even the light had to agree. You begin to see how it all connects. The Nile, the sun, the stone, the stars. Not separate parts of a culture, but one living equation. The obelisk, once placed, would never leave. It would stand through floods and famine, dynasties, and dust. A marker not of conquest, but of coherence. And yet, some of them did leave. That knowledge floats into you like a leaf on the river. They were taken, dislodged, shipped away to cities far beyond these banks. You feel a quiet ache in your chest, a pause in your drifting. But the Nile doesn't stop. It continues, winding forward, bearing you with it. And you understand something soft but certain. Even when stone is moved, its story is still carried by the water. You sit up right now, the sun higher in the sky. The boat glides past another temple ruin, where broken columns hold up nothing but memory. A faded obelisk lies fallen, half buried in reeds. Its tip is chipped, its shadow lost, yet still it feels like it's listening. You watch it pass, and the boat moves on, farther downstream, farther into the current of change, and you begin to wonder what happens when a gift like this is offered to someone who Doesn't understand its weight? You feel the current shift, not in water, but in time. The river fades, and now you stand in a distant land where empires negotiate not with reverence, but with reasons. Time slips forward like silk through fingers. The golden heat of Egypt fades, replaced by fog and formality. You open your eyes not to sand or sunlight, but to parchment, polish, and polished shoes. The scent of ink and coal lingers in the air. You are inside an office of empire. Wooden shelves line the walls, filled with maps, ledgers, and treaties. The windows are tall, but gray curtains mute the outside world. Everything feels arranged, as if spontaneity has been removed for efficiency. You sit still, watching it unfold. Men in tailored coats circle a table. Their voices are low, rehearsed, not wondering aloud but deciding. A name is spoken. Cleopatra's needle. Not with reverence, but with intent. You lean closer. It is the 19th century. Britain has stretched its reach across continents, its ships anchored in every ocean. And Egypt, ancient, beautiful, fractured, has become both muse and mirror. Its relics are seen not as sacred, but as symbols to possess. To parade. An Egyptian ruler, Khedive Ismail Pasha, offers one of the obelisks to Queen Victoria, but not as a gesture of spiritual reverence, as thanks for British support in war, for favor, for presence. It is a gift, they say. But you feel the weight behind the word, because a gift implies ease. But this gift is not easy. This gift is enormous, to 69 feet tall, nearly 250 tons. It will not fit in any room, nor rest on any shelf. It cannot be boxed or bowed. And yet the letter is signed. The arrangements begin. You imagine the Queen receiving the news. A foreign monument, ancient, mysterious, Egyptian, soon to grace. Her empire, how curious, how symbolic, how impractical. But no one refuses a gift like this, not publicly, not without consequences. So Britain accepts. But with acceptance comes a problem. How do you move something this big, this old, this heavy, across oceans? How do you honor a gift that defies storage? You step into the mind of those tasked with solving it. They are not pharaohs or priests. They are engineers, surveyors, diplomats. Men of function, not feeling. You picture them in long coats, measuring. Diagrams by candlelight. They sketch plans and revise them. They calculate costs, delay approvals, propose compromises. Years pass. Because moving a monument is not just physics. It's politics, budgets, pride. They argue about who will pay. The British government refuses to cover it. They accepted the gift, yes, but transporting it was another matter. So the effort is left to a private man, Sir William Wilson, a retired railway engineer with a mind for steel and stubbornness. He decides he will do it. With his own funding, with his own team, he designs a custom container, a long iron cylinder, with rounded ends, not a boat, exactly, more like a floating tube. Inside, the obelisk will rest, suspended and sealed like a message in a bottle. They call it the Cleopatra. It will be towed across the Mediterranean and Atlantic by a larger ship. It's brilliant and foolish and beautiful. You sit beside the blueprints, running your fingers along the lines. You feel the tension in every stroke. This is not just a journey. It's a gamble, because when you receive a gift too heavy to carry, you must either let it go or choose to suffer for its symbolism. You wonder how many people wanted to say no, to decline politely, to suggest perhaps the obelisk was better left in the land it knew. But the machinery of empire has no brakes. It only accelerates. So the Cleopatra is built. The obelisk is loaded, and the sea awaits. But you remain, for now. In this room, surrounded by people who think in strategy, not sunbeams. They do not ask why the obelisk matters, only whether it will arrive intact. They speak of it as a prize, a spectacle, a statement. But you remember what it was: a sacred line of stone carved to catch the first light of day, a whisper between the Nile and the sky. And here it is, reduced to a line item in a shipping ledger. You step outside, away from the noise. The fog wraps around your coat like a second skin. The city is gray, the buildings square and solemn. You wonder how a monument shaped by sunlight will survive in a land ruled by shadow. The gift was accepted. The plans are made. The preparations are finished. But a strange silence follows. Not the calm before a voyage, but the stillness before. Uncertainty because what do you do when a symbol arrives, and you're not ready to understand it? You stare into the fog. And far beyond it, across oceans and storms, a cylinder floats into being. It rocks gently in the harbor, a needle tucked. Inside a capsule of iron, waiting not just for motion, but for meaning. You step onto the creaking deck, and the sea greets you with a chill. The air is salted and sharp, filled with movement and memory. Below your feet, the planks sway, shifting slightly with each roll of the tide. Not wild, not violent, but purposeful. Everything here moves with intention. Ahead of you rests a strange sight. A massive iron cylinder, round at the ends, floating low in the water beside the ship. Inside that capsule, invisible but certain, lies the obelisk. Still, horizontal, still asleep. They called it the Cleopatra. A hollow cradle forged for a single purpose: to carry stone across ocean. Not a warship, not a vessel of trade, just a floating promise. A needle sealed in steel. You walk slowly along the edge of the main deck. The larger ship, the Olga, is the one doing the towing. It holds the power, the fuel, the charts. But the Cleopatra holds the story. Inside, the obelisk rests on wooden beams and iron ribs, secured with bolts, rope, and careful counterweights. It cannot move. It must not shift. Because movement here is danger. Transporting something this heavy across this much water, it is not a triumph brute strength. It is a negotiation with nature. You cannot overpower the sea. You must understand it. You look out at the horizon. The water rolls endlessly, like breath. Swells rise not with urgency, but with rhythm. There are no straight lines here. Only arcs, cycles, spirals. The language of the ocean is soft, but absolute. And this voyage, this delicate choreography, depends on mathematics. Buoyancy, weight distribution, drag. The engineers who designed the Cleopatra studied displacement like poets study silence. They calculated the draft of the cylinder, the friction of the tow line, the potential energy of waves against iron skin. You breathe in slowly. It smells of salt, oil, and iron. Science is here, not in formulas alone, but in the silence between them. You feel the tension in the tow rope stretched between the Olga and the Cleopatra. A line made not just of fiber, but of trust. It is not a flat path. It is a living body. It twists and lifts. It sways and sighs. And anything placed upon it, ship, soul, or story, must learn to move with it. You step back from the railing and glance downward. The Cleopatra bobs gently, stable in appearance, but vulnerable in truth. It is long, narrow, and heavy. One wrong tilt, one unexpected wave, could tip the balance, and the obelisk would be lost. You close your eyes and imagine the journey so far. They left from Alexandria, a port alive with voices and gulls. Slowly at first, testing every bolt, every weld. Then into open sea, the Mediterranean stretching out like a memory remembered too late. The crew on the Cleopatra is small. Just 6 men inside the sealed shell. No windows, little comfort. But they know their duty. They check the moorings. They keep the obelisk still. One night, a storm rolls in. You remember it clearly. Waves climb high, hurling themselves against the steel hull. The Cleopatra rocks dangerously, the tow line snapping taut with each rise. The sea does not care for ancient monuments. It doesn't pause for heritage. It knows only motion. At one point, the crew inside the Cleopatra is forced to abandon it. The danger becomes too great. The wind screams. The capsule floats untethered. Alone. It drifts for hours. The next morning, quiet returns. The sun pushes through clouds. And miraculously, the Cleopatra is found, bobbing gently, as if it had. Never panicked at all. You sit on the deck now, knees drawn to your chest. The water sparkles in the sunlight, pretending nothing happened. But you know better. The obelisk is not just a weight. It is a responsibility. Transporting it is not about delivering an object. It is about protecting intention, across elements that dissolve intention without warning. And yet, somehow, science holds. Not through dominance, but through grace. Through the quiet mastery of balance and anticipation. Each day, the crew checks their bearings. The cylinder moves westward, past Gibraltar, into the vast Atlantic. The winds shift. The current deepens. But the Cleopatra continues. You stare at the water long enough, and you start to see patterns. Not chaos, but code. You begin to understand why engineers work in curves and arcs. Why angles matter more than effort. Nature is not against you. But she demands you listen. Days pass. The air cools. Gulls change shape. And one morning, there it is. The coast of England. Gray cliffs in the distance. A shoreline used to receiving ships, but not like this. The Cleopatra is towed slowly into the mouth of the Thames. The current now runs sluggish, thick with sediment. And city. And beneath all this movement, all this planning, the obelisk waits. It has not seen sunlight in weeks. It has not known firm ground in months, but it has crossed oceans. Not by its own will, but by design. By trust in steel, in math, in quiet determination. You watch as the iron cradle is moored to the dock. The cylinder creaks and hisses. Crews prepare to unload, but you linger on the water, on the memory of movement, because the journey has not ended. It has only changed shape. What once floated must now be raised again, not by boat, but by city, by a place where the obelisk was never meant to stand. You step onto solid ground, but the stone has yet to touch earth. Fog curls at your feet. London waits, uncertain how to welcome a monument born of sun. You step off the dock and into the city. The stones beneath your feet are wet, not with river spray, but with rain that falls without drama. It doesn't storm here. It settles, soft, constant, forgettable, a city of drizzle and dusk. London rises around you in gray layers, iron railings, brick buildings, chimneys smudging the skyline. The sun, if it's anywhere, is hidden behind low clouds that feel stitched to the rooftops. You pull your coat tighter, though it isn't truly. Cold, just damp, just heavy. The obelisk arrives here too, by barge, by crane, by calculation. It is lifted from the Thames with groaning pulleys and braced steel. The city watches from behind umbrellas, gloved hands tucked into wool pockets. No one cheers. No one bows. The obelisk is set upright again, this time on the Victoria Embankment, not at a temple, not in a sacred courtyard, but between the river and the road, between cabs and carriages, flanked by street lamps and benches. You stand before it now. It is the same stone, the same pink granite, the same weight. But here, something has shifted. The sunlight that once gilded its tip now glances off steel bridge beams. The hieroglyphs, once warmed by dawn and worship, are now streaked with soot and rainwater. Ray is no longer overhead. Now there are pigeons. Now there are timetables. You reach out and touch the surface. It is cold, not from the air, but from displacement. This stone does not belong here. It isn't protest that you feel. It's dissonance. A whisper of mismatch, like a violin note. Slightly off-key, because the obelisk was made for open space, for desert breath and endless sky. It was a message sent upward, a frozen prayer. But here, its voice is muffled. You walk slowly around it. The base is surrounded by cast-iron sphinx, stylized, Victorian, almost theatrical. They sit like guardians, but their gaze feels decorative, not protective. A plaque explains the history. Words etched in bronze, dates, names, dimensions. But they read like inventory, not intimacy. As if facts alone could hold meaning. You watch a couple walk past, barely glancing. A child throws breadcrumbs near the Sphinx. A jogger taps by with headphones in. The obelisk stands through it all, tall, unmoving. Present, but unnoticed. You wonder what it dreams of, if stone can dream. Does it remember the Nile's rhythm? The voices of priests? The scent of papyrus? Smoke? Or has it gone quiet inside? You sit on a nearby bench, hands folded, breath slow. The river murmurs behind you, but it's a different river. Not ancient, not sacred. Just tidal, just brown. It rises and falls according to charts and concrete. Sky doesn't open here. It leans. And the obelisk, though it still points upward, feels less like a bridge and more like a relic waiting to be understood. And yet, there's beauty in the persistence. Despite smog and seasons, despite foot traffic and forgetfulness, the obelisk remains. It doesn't shrink. It doesn't crumble. It simply stands, as if remembering matters. Even in exile, you close your eyes and imagine light, not the dull gray above you now, but the sun it once knew. You picture the desert again, warm, golden, unbroken. You remember how the obelisk glowed, not just from reflection, but from purpose. And now here it stands, in a city that forgot the sun, still reaching toward something it can't quite find. You run your hand along the damp bench. Drops cling to your sleeve, and a soft fog thickens near the river. You think of how places hold memory, how not everything adapts. Some things stay rooted in the place they were meant for, and when moved, they do not protest. But they do not sing. The science of weather, of atmosphere, of climate, it explains this grayness, this cool ache in the air, the latitude, the pressure, the warm Gulf Stream mixing with Arctic breath. But no formula can explain how out of place this obelisk feels, because this is not a failure of physics. It's a fracture of fit, and yet the engineers succeeded. They brought the obelisk safely here. They raised it. They anchored it. They even built the story around it. But stories need soil. And this one is planted far from its roots. Still, something inside you softens. You begin to see that maybe presence alone can be a kind of power. That even if no one stops to listen, even if no one remembers why it came, the obelisk still holds space. A column of silence in a city of noise. And perhaps silence has its own gravity. Perhaps it pulls memory toward it, even when memory resists. You rise from the bench and walk back to the base. Your fingertips find the grooves in the stone, and you trace them like braille, not for knowledge, but for closeness. The obelisk does not respond. But it doesn't need to. It is not here to explain. It is here to endure. You look up once more. The top vanishes into mist, not glowing, but still. And somewhere beyond that fog, another city waits. A different monument. A different rhythm, because this was not the only gift, not the only obelisk that crossed water, not the only stone seeking sun. You blink, and the rain becomes steam. Cobblestones fade into asphalt. And across an ocean, another needle dreams beneath a skyline of glass. You find yourself beneath tall trees and sky-thick buildings. The air smells of leaves and iron, warmed by the breath of a city that never stops moving. You're in Central Park now, a green pause tucked between concrete sentences. And rising, from the soil, quiet and slender, stands another obelisk, Cleopatra's Kneel. Not a replica, not a memorial, but the real thing, over 3,000 years old, older than the streets, the skyscrapers, the very nation that surrounds it. It stands near the Met, where modern visitors pass by holding iced coffees and cameras. Some look up, most don't, but the stone doesn't mind. It's waded through longer silences. You walk closer. The base is uneven, wrapped in cracked paving stones and faded plaques. The obelisk seems to tilt slightly, not from failure, but from settling, as if the earth beneath it sighs and shifts. You place your palm on the surface. It's warm from the sun, a quiet contrast to the cold one you touched in London. This stone feels almost alert, as if it's been listening to the chaos around it, and there is chaos. You hear it, sirens, voices, the constant thrum of tires and footsteps. Subway trains rattle underground, echoing through iron veins. The obelisk hears them too. Its base hums with vibrations from below, the steady pulse of electricity, movement. Modernity. And yet it does not flinch. It has seen different cities rise and fall. Thebes, Alexandria, Rome, London, now New York. You sit on the grass and look up. The obelisk stretches into the sky, but its shadow is short today. The afternoon sun rides high, its light scattering between branches and glass. You wonder what it means to place something so ancient into something so new. Here, people walk fast. Time is money. Buildings compete to be taller. Noise is constant. But the obelisk resists all that. It doesn't race. It doesn't speak. It just stands. And in doing so, it asks different questions. You imagine the journey again. This one began in Heliopolis, like its siblings. It stood in temple courts, among priests and palms. It watched sunrises aligned with sacred architecture. Its surface carved not with names of the living, but with prayers for eternity. Then it was taken, gifted, claimed, transported. In 1881, it arrived in New York, a gift from Egypt to America, meant to celebrate friendship and progress. But moving, it was no easy gesture. It was a feat of science, sweat, and precision. You picture it again, hauled from Alexandria's sands, loaded onto the steamship Dessaulles, resting in the ship's hull like a secret carried across oceans. When it reached New York Harbor, the challenge began again. No cranes tall enough. No roads prepared. So engineers built a custom track, a long rail stretching from the Hudson River to Central Park. It took months. Each block of the city made way, as workers slowly rolled 220 tons of history through a city built on speed. You marvel at the patience it must have required, because in a city that rushes, they had to move at the speed of stone. When it finally rose here, its top piercing a new sky, the crowd applauded. But did they understand? You're not sure. The obelisk was never meant to be a landmark. It was meant to be a beacon, a spiritual line drawn upward, connecting Earth to cosmos. But here, it shares its space with joggers and saxophone players, with shadows from towers that were once unimagined. Still, the stone doesn't resist. It watches. It absorbs. It endures. You lay back in the grass, head resting on folded arms. Above, the obelisk rises past branches that sway in lazy rhythm. A pigeon lands near the base, tilts its head, then moves on. You wonder what dreams the obelisk might hold here, in a city of light pollution and long work hours. Does it miss the desert? The sharp scent of myrrh? The cool hush of temple walls? Or has it found a new kind of silence in this garden framed by glass and noise? There's science beneath the soil, too. New York's bedrock, dense and ancient, makes the city's verticality possible. The obelisk now stands atop that same rock, sunk deep with concrete and calculations. It no longer needs ritual to hold it upright, just physics, but physics can't explain its presence. Not fully, because something lingers here, a ghost of alignment, a trace of sacred geometry in the middle of an unpredictable grid. You sit, up again, eyes soft. The city continues behind you, honking, flashing, pulsing dot, but in front of you, the obelisk stays still, unimpressed, unchanged dot, and in that stillness, you find something rare, dot, not nostalgia. Not all, but pause, dot, the kind that slows your breath, the kind that reminds you that not all stories are told in words. Some are carved, some are carried, some are simply placed, dot. You rise slowly, brushing bits of grass from your clothing. You look back once more and feel the faintest pulse, as if the obelisk is remembering something you can't yet name. A hum beneath the surface. A call across continents, because this was not the final stop, not the last city. There is still one more place where another obelisk waits in silence. Across the sea again, in a city of light and lace, another needle stands, not among temples, but where revolutions once stirred. You arrive in Paris as the sky softens to gold. Evening settles slowly here, like perfume in a velvet room. The city does not rush the light. It invites it to linger. And in the heart of that lingering, where boulevards bloom in every direction, you find the Obelisk dot. It stands in the center of the Place d'Ilia Concorde, surrounded by motion, but unmoved. Cars sweep past in rings, tourists click shutters, and fountains ripple nearby with orchestrated charm. But the stone remains still, a vertical pause in a horizontal city. You walk toward it. The air smells of dust and elegance. Chatter floats in multiple languages, but the obelisk hears them all as one long conversation with time. This is the Luxor obelisk, a twin to those left behind, cut from the same pink granite of Aswan, raised by Pharaoh Ramesses II, and once flanking the great temple of Luxor. Out here, though, its companion is gone, and it stands alone, alone in a square once soaked in revolution. You pause, tracing your gaze upward. Its surface, smoothed by centuries and stories, still holds its hieroglyphs, lines written not for reading, but for remembering. You wonder what it sees from here. On one side, the Eiffel Tower rises like lace. On another, the River Seine slips past in silent ceremony. And at the square's edge, the grand obelisks of commerce and couture, flags, storefronts, art, all beckoning the future. But the stone looks not forward, only upward. Dot at dusk, a slant of amber light touches its tip. And you feel it, a flicker, a recognition, as if some distant sun remembers where this monument first stood. You walk around the base. No sphinx here, no benches, just cobblestones and shadows. A small plaque offers facts. The obelisk was gifted to France in 1831 by the ruler of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha. It arrived by barge, pulled along the Mediterranean, and was erected with fanfare before a watching crowd. But now, few notice. It has become background. Photographed. Yes, admired, briefly, but not truly seen. You sit on the edge of the square and listen. A violinist plays nearby, his song both fragile and full. The notes lift into the cooling air and brush the granite with memory. You wonder if the obelisk remembers the rituals it once knew. Sunrise songs, prayers offered in early morning light, incense rising in coils beside its base. Here, the rituals are different. Morning joggers, midday selfie takers, evening lovers walking hand in hand. Yet something holds, something ancient, even among the new. The science of light, of angle and orbit, still touches this stone. It still aligns with the path of the sun, though the buildings around it no longer care. You run your fingers across the grooves in the granite, each mark carved with intent, each symbol a moment pressed into eternity. Even though you cannot read them, you understand their purpose, to connect sky and story. The French engineers who raised it here understood stone, understood weight, understood leverage. But did they understand the silence it would bring? Because here, in this grand square, the obelisk speaks less, not from lack of voice, but from the abundance of noise. And yet, silence is not absence. It is a kind of presence. The obelisk listens to everything. The wind in cafe umbrellas, the wheels of passing bicycles, the heartbeat of Paris, fast, distracted, beautiful. You close your eyes and let the sounds blend. For a moment, the city fades, and you feel the desert again. The heat, the stillness, the long arc of shadow moving across sand. The obelisk has carried that feeling here. A sliver of sacred geometry, tucked into the clockwork of civilization. You open your eyes and smile, because even in exile, the stone remembers who it is, and maybe that's enough. You stand and step away slowly, leaving it behind for now. But part of you stays rooted, a small piece that still feels the hum, beneath its base. Because beneath the fashion and fountains, beneath the elegance and empire, this monument still listens for something older than any city. And perhaps that's why it stands so quietly, waiting for someone to notice that remembering is its own kind of reverence. Night begins to fall, and the streetlights flicker on. You begin to wonder, how much weight do symbols carry when no one knows what they mean? You sit beside the obelisk, not to learn something new, but to understand what you already feel. The stone is still, and yet it stirs things inside you. Questions that rise slowly, like breath in cold air. What is a symbol, really? A shape? A story? A burden dressed as beauty? You close your eyes and listen. To the birds above, to the wind passing between buildings, to the hum of 1,000 lives moving nearby, unaware of the monument's gaze. And beneath that hum, a different frequency, quieter, heavier. The obelisk does not speak, but it holds everything that was ever said around it. This stone, once carved in devotion, transported in ambition, raised in pride, now stands in stillness, not sacred, not silent, just waiting. You imagine the hands that made it, calloused, focused, patient. They shaped the granite not only with tools, but with intention. The weight was known, but so was the meaning. Now, in modern cities, we measure things in numbers, pounds, tons, cubic meters, but the Egyptians measured with spirit. They saw weight not just as a physical force, but as a story to be balanced. You run your hand along the granite. Its surface is smoother than it should be, worn by time, by rain, by curiosity. But even smooth, it is not soft. Symbols rarely are. You think of what we carry today: phones, fears, expectations, memories we can't name, desires we don't understand. We hide them in language, in posture, in public spaces. You look up again. The obelisk is tall, unmoved. A needle meant to point toward the divine, but now it points to clouds, to satellite trails, to light pollution. Its purpose hasn't changed, but its context has. That's the weight you feel, not the mass of granite, but the tension between meaning and forgetting. You shift slightly, placing both feet flat on the ground. Feel the pressure of your body. Feel the earth holding you up. This too is science. Weight is mass pulled by gravity. An interaction between what is here and what holds us down. But symbols carry another kind of weight, the emotional gravity. Of attention. We assign them value. We place them in the world. We say, this is important. Even if we no longer remember why. And over time, that importance changes. Sometimes it grows. Sometimes it rots. You picture a scale. On one side, the obelisk. On the other, everything it's meant to represent. Civilization, conquest, culture, mystery. But who's balancing that scale now? You look around. A child runs past, without glancing at the stone. A man on his phone leans briefly against it, then moves on. There's no harm in it. But something shifts in your chest. How do we honor something we've stopped seeing? You breathe deeply and feel the shape of the question settle inside you. You remember the physics of load. How a bridge holds weight, not just by resisting force, but by distributing it. Arches, tension, compression. Invisible patterns that keep things from collapsing. Can a culture do the same? Can it distribute the weight of memory without breaking beneath it? You think of cities filled with monuments. Statues of men once worshipped, now questioned. Memorials for wars no one alive remembers. Symbols placed in stone, but not always in truth. What do we choose to elevate? And why? The obelisk was once raised as a gesture of cosmic alignment. Now it exists as evidence of empire, of engineering, of endurance. You lean your head back, feel the sky above. It doesn't answer, but it listens. You start to feel the connection between this monument and others. Not just obelisks, but all the things we raise to be seen. Flags, trophies, skyscrapers, graves. Each one a signal, each one a decision. Even language carries weight. The words you use shape what you carry. A gift becomes a burden. A burden becomes a legacy. A legacy becomes a story too complicated to unwrap. You think of the engineers who moved this stone. The ropes, the ramps, the ships. Not just physics, but effort. Real effort. Sleepless nights. Careful angles. Calculations in salt air. Did they understand what they were lifting? Maybe not fully. But they lifted it anyway. You look down at your own hands. So much smaller, but not powerless, because you carry things too. Every day, memories, worries, hopes you haven't spoken aloud. There, heavy in a different way, but they shape your spine. They bend your breath, and maybe, just maybe, you can learn from the Obelisk. It doesn't resist the weight. It just stands beneath it. It lets the earth do the work. It shares its burden with time. You inhale slowly. The air tastes of stone and distance. You wonder if the obelisk feels regret for being removed, for being recontextualized. But regret, like weight, requires memory. And stone remembers differently. Not in detail, but in presence. You think of the sun, the one it used to. Worship, how it still chases that light, even if clouds often block it now. That persistence matters. You rise to your feet. Let your shadow fall alongside the obelisk. Two silhouettes, one fleeting, one enduring. You walk away slowly. Not because you're done thinking, but because some questions deserve to echo a little longer. The ground beneath you holds everything. And still, it doesn't complain. That's the secret of symbols, perhaps. They ask to be seen, not solved. And some are not here to explain, but to remind. As you walk on, you wonder gently, what else have we placed in stone? Not to remember, but to forget? And in the quiet space between forgetting and remembering, a whisper stirs, a voice carried not by words, but by the stillness of stone, and the questions it leaves behind at night. Night falls gently, as if someone has turned the world's volume down. The air cools, the sky deepens, and the city, once brimming with footsteps and laughter and horns, begins to exhale. You walk slowly now, shoes brushing against the pavement. The lights blur slightly, soft halos blooming around lamps and passing cars. Everything feels quieter, not just around you, but within you. The obelisk waits. You return to it, not with questions, but with quiet. You don't need answers right now. Only presence. It stands exactly as it always does, tall, unmoving, rooted in time. But at night, it feels different, more alive. Not illuminated, but glowing in its own way. The moon casts a slow silver sheen down its surface. The hieroglyphs shimmer softly, not in brightness, but in suggestion. You step closer, your breath slower now. Everything around you stills. And in the stillness, something stirs. Not a voice, not a message, but a rhythm. Something beneath language. The obelisk seems to hum, not with sound, but with structure, a low, steady resonance that speaks through presence. Not volume. It's the kind of whisper you feel in your bones. A frequency just below hearing. The lull of weight against gravity, of time folding into shape. You reach out, your fingers brushing its base. It's cold, but not empty. More like the coolness of something that remembers warmth. A shadow of sun. You sit beside it. The stone looms above you like a sentinel, but not a guard. More like a guide, a patient companion. And as you settle into the earth, you begin to sense what it holds. It doesn't tell stories the way we do. There is no beginning, no climax, no conclusion. Instead, it offers patterns. You notice the geometry, the way it tapers, not abruptly, but with purpose. A line drawn with reverence, from earth to sky, from base to tip. From now to then, the obelisk is shaped by mathematics, by human minds attuned to symmetry and light. Its angles align with the path of the sun, its position chosen not randomly, but with celestial care. Even now, centuries removed, continents away, it still reaches toward stars it once knew. You close your eyes. Behind your lids, you see the desert again. You see workers carving lines with wooden tools, measuring with rope and shadow. You see priests whispering. In morning light, you see the stone first lifted, first placed, first bathed in dawn. But now it hums alone, and yet its loneliness doesn't feel sad. It feels sacred, because the obelisk does not resist the passing of time. It welcomes it, like a tuning fork struck once. Its vibration continues, quiet, persistent, woven into the fabric of the space around it. You imagine the science behind that feeling. Not mysticism, but resonance. The way certain shapes and materials amplify frequencies invisible to the eye. Stone, dense and ancient, absorbs vibration differently than wood or metal. It holds energy longer. It releases it slower. Maybe that's why it feels like it's still speaking. You lean your head back against the base, letting your body rest fully into the monument's shadow. The city around you moves in gentle contrast. A soft breeze, a rustle of trees, a taxi in the distance, a laugh echoing down a side street. But near the obelisk, everything is quieter, and the silence begins to shape you. You start to notice your own weight, the way the ground holds you, without question, the way gravity never hurries, the way your breath feels heavier, but safe, like you're being anchored gently. You think about how much we try to hold up. Ideas, traditions, histories, ourselves. We build statues. We write books. We bury time in things that last longer than we do. But the obelisk doesn't try to hold anything up. It simply is. And in being what it is, it teaches. It teaches that presence is its own kind of purpose. That stillness can carry more meaning than motion. That silence, too, is a form of remembering. You sit with these thoughts like you would sit beside a fire, not to solve them, but to feel their warmth. And as you drift, you begin to wonder, is the obelisk still doing what it was built to do? Not worshipped, not surrounded by ritual, but still aligned, still reaching, still anchoring something unseen. Its function hasn't failed. It's just changed form. Now it whispers to passersby, to wanderers, to the occasional insomniac, curious and quiet. To you. You look up again. The tip of the stone slices into sky. Still sharp, still true. The stars blink gently above it, unrushed. And for a moment, you imagine the obelisk reaching through light years, communing with the same constellations it once knew in Egypt. The geometry still fits. The alignment still matters. Even across centuries, you close your eyes again, this time to rest. Your back presses into the earth. Your breath deepens. And the obelisk hums on. Not loud, not clear, but certain. It tells you something in the language of angles, that time is a spiral, that memory lives in mass, that presence is its own form of meaning. The stone does not need to speak. It only needs to stay. You feel sleep pulling at you. Now, gently, like a tide, the obelisk watches. Not as a god, but as a witness. It has seen kings rise, cities fall, languages shift, skies change. But tonight, it sees you, and you see it. And in that moment, quiet and complete, nothing else is needed. The wind shifts ever so slightly. A question floats with it, not about stone, but about the ones who placed it. And now, as our story gently fades, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this moment with me. Your presence here means the world, and your support helps me create even more peaceful journeys. Just for you. If this helped you rest, please consider liking, subscribing, or simply coming back tomorrow night. Until then, stay cozy, stay kind, and may your dreams tonight be soft, serene, and full of wonder. Good night, my friend. With warmth, David.